Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ross Green. I'm one of the account managers from Procurement for Housing. So just want to say a big welcome to you all, and thanks for joining us today on this Lunch and Learn webinar hosted by Procurement for Housing and one of our wonderful telecoms framework suppliers in Daisy Communications. Bit of housekeeping in that the session will be getting recorded, so you will all receive a link through to the video at the conclusion of the webinar. Short and sweet, so I'd like to hand you over now to Ed Povell, Senior Account Manager at Daisy Communications, who will make further introductions and begin the session. Enjoy.
Thank you, Ross. My name, as Ross has said, is Ed Povell. I'm an account manager at Daisy Communications. I specialise in providing telecom services, social housing providers across the UK, and I've been doing it for about 16 years. We've also got Jason Proctor. He's one of Daisy's IoT specialists and has around 20 years experience in telecoms. He works with customers of all shapes and sizes around the country and has recently been involved in a number of large IoT projects. And Bernie McPhillips as well. He'll be sort of doing the bulk of this presentation. He's got over a decade of experience in telecoms, including working in a range of roles at O2. And for the last 4 years or so, he's worked at our IoT partner, Pangaea, who help us to deliver our IoT solutions. So he's well placed to provide a lot more information on this topic. So just quickly on questions and answers. We are having a Q&A session at the end. So while we're going through, if you've got any questions, please submit them via the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And we'll get to them at the end of the presentation and run through them then. Okay, thank you very much, and over to Bernie.
Thank you very much, Ed. Much appreciated. Welcome everybody to the session. I'm going to start off by explaining a little about what is IoT. So what is the Internet of Things? It's essentially a phrase that was coined quite some years ago by a chap called Kevin Ashton. He's an innovator and a consumer expert who's been credited with coining that phrase to describe connecting objects or things in the physical world to the internet. This was actually all the way back in 1999, and that's as far back as when Lance Armstrong won his very first Tour de France. The euro was introduced as a currency, the minimum wage was only £3.60 an hour, and DVDs were only just starting to phase out VHS. So apologies to those of you who thought you might be dialing in today to learn about something extremely new, but I do guarantee it is really exciting and will be very relevant to everybody listening. So before we get started, you will shortly be presented with a poll that's going to ask your feedback on the below question. So we wanted to start by asking, how likely are you to use IoT? So there should be a window that pops up in front of you, asking how likely are you to use IoT, with 4 options: highly likely, quite likely, unsure, or unlikely. So if you could kindly select one of those options, that would be awesome. And we should shortly see the results of those. Here we go. It's quite a mixed bag, I suppose. How likely are you to use? Highly likely 44%, quite likely 39%. So the bulk either highly or quite likely. A small number of people unsure. Hopefully we'll be able to tip those people over the edge today. And 0 unlikely, which is awesome. So really relevant audience today. So thank you for that. So I did start off by talking a little bit about what is the Internet of Things. It's about connecting objects or things to the internet. These objects are typically embedded with sensors, software, and other technologies for the purpose of connecting and exchanging data with other devices and systems over the internet. So by combining these connected devices with automated systems, it's possible to gather information, analyze it, and then create an action with little or no human intervention. Many of us are users of IoT devices and solutions today, maybe without even realizing it. But I'm pretty sure all of our lives are impacted in some way by the Internet of Things today. So if we think about wearable devices that many of us might be wearing even now on this call, an Apple Watch, some form of Garmin device or Fitbit, this is taking information from our bodies. These devices now are exceptionally well capable and perform things like ECGs. They can take temperature, they're monitoring your heart rate, your activity levels. Are you standing, sitting? how many calories have you burned, and it's then uploading that information into some form of system where you can access it, look at historical data, identify trends, and in the purpose of a fitness watch, potentially change behavior or track performance as an athlete. So that, you know, I'm sure lots of us are using those types of solutions today, or in the home, things like Nest and Hive to control our heating or lighting or security systems, and now more and more voice activation with, you know, many voice assistants around. I daren't say the word of one of them in particular because I have one in the room and it'll probably wake up and start chatting back to me. Even our vehicles, many of those are connected to be able to analyze the performance of that vehicle, track that vehicle, even inform manufacturers of engine diagnostics. My wife very recently received a call from our manufacturer alerting her that a humidity sensor was faulty in her vehicle and therefore air conditioning was unable to run at its optimum level. And therefore the car was recalled, fixed and sent back out to her again. And all that was done with her not knowing a thing. That data was sent from the vehicle to the manufacturer, and that whole process was instigated with no interaction needed from the consumer whatsoever. So the Internet of Things effectively offers us opportunities to be more efficient in how we do things, saves us time and money, whilst making our workforces safer and often driving huge environmental impacts. So one example that I have is smart vending. So if we think about back in the day would have been a man in a van with a clipboard. He would have a range of vending machines that he may need to go out and fill. And he would leave the depot every morning with his van stocked floor to ceiling with every single product that be required. And he would set off on his merry way and visit every single vending machine within his region to see if it needed any stock. If we make that scenario smart, we deploy IoT within that type of process. We make the vending machines smart so they send daily stock updates to the distributor. So now when that driver leaves, he only needs to carry the stock that he needs to carry. So therefore he's carrying a lighter load. He can make fewer trips. He only visits the machines that need visiting. So therefore no wasted journeys, less mileage. And all of these things save money, save time, and also have a positive environmental impact because the vehicle will be using less CO2. The company can have more efficient stock management, therefore less waste. Less miles on that vehicle could mean lower insurance, less frequent service intervals, fewer tire or brake replacements, and therefore just cost savings all round. There's always multiple layers to the benefits that come when deploying IoT. As you can see on the screen, these stats come from Microsoft. More than 90% of adopters are now able to make more informed decisions that lead to improved productivity, and that allows valuable resources to be redeployed where they're most needed. And a similar percentage of people, 90% or just below, are seeing cost savings and at the same time an increase in quality. So in summary, we can make customers, or in the case of housing, residents, happier and do it in spending less money. So it just sounds like an all-round winning combination. When we're connecting our IoT solutions, there are lots of things to consider. There are typically a number of ways of connecting these devices, either through more traditional fixed line broadband services, such as Wi-Fi and fixed lines, or cellular using SIM cards. With lots of devices needing rapid deployment, there's often no time to dig up roads and install broadband, or devices need to move from site to site. They could be fitted into vehicles, or could be carried or even worn by a person. So there's an increased inclination to use SIM cards and therefore a more mobile solution when connecting IoT. So 4G and now 5G networks are becoming increasingly reliable. They're accessible immediately from almost anywhere. They allow critical devices to always be connected, because clever things can now be achieved using cellular technology, such as a single SIM that will allow a device to connect to any of the UK networks based on signal strength. This has a big impact on rural deployments too, where broadband service is not always available or they're very expensive to access. And rollout is so easy with zero consideration needed regarding optimum networks in each location because the SIM does the work for you. I'm not expecting you to be able to read all of the chart on the right. It does look like a bit of an eye test. What it's there to do is to illustrate how the Internet of Things is driving all of the benefits that I've already mentioned across all manner of business verticals. It's not just housing. So this demonstrates that IoT is not a niche product and it's here to stay. The opportunities more relevant to the audience here today are in smart buildings, energy, security, and lone working. And those opportunities are vast and the benefits just as huge. They do only make up a small part of what the Internet of Things has to offer. So some of the solutions that we'll look at today that will be of interest to you are energy, lighting, building access, fire safety, security, intruder alarms, lone worker safety, CCTV, environmental monitoring such as air quality, humidity sensors, occupancy monitoring, and carbon monoxide alarms. Some of these solutions are what we'll talk about in the next session. So we'll talk about how IoT is coming to revolutionize social housing with a range of use and benefits. The first one that we look at is repairs and maintenance. Preemptive maintenance is looking at the fact that maintenance makes up 80% of all costs for public and private letting agents. Time and money can be saved immediately by planning maintenance more effectively in advance, and therefore simply paying significantly fewer emergency call-out fees. By being able to accurately report on the condition of homes will become a huge benefit. Being able to identify a maintenance issue early can lead to a significantly lower repair cost. An example of this would be identifying maybe a concerning increase in humidity and resolving that issue before it could lead to damp and therefore much more expensive repair costs. Accurate and real-time reporting allows mobile workers to better manage their workflow. They only need to make essential visits and understand the condition of each home before they even enter it. So that maybe explains a little bit why I used that kind of random vending example a short while ago, because all of the benefits that I would apply to that man in his van going around all of the vending machines to see what stock they need would now apply to this remote care worker, for example, or someone responsible for the maintenance of social housing. They would need to make fewer trips, therefore less mileage, no wasted journeys. They would only need to carry the equipment that they needed for the jobs that they were going to, therefore lighter loads. All of these things would mean less fuel, less CO2 emissions, more efficient stock management, less waste. Less miles driven would mean lower insurance and less frequent service intervals. All of those things would apply to this scenario, just as it did in the smart vending solution that I mentioned previously. The next element of IoT in housing is around energy and utilities. Net zero is something that businesses all around the globe are striving towards, and housing agencies are no different. Firstly, the ability to be able to monitor accurately how energy is being used in the first place is huge, because that allows us to accurately understand what actually needs to be offset in other parts of the organization in order to achieve net zero. Monitoring energy consumption remotely means less physical meter readings, which would have been challenging enough during lockdown. That then leads to less estimation of your usage and therefore results in more accurate billing, making it easier for tenants to budget. Building management solutions can also help to change behavior by giving insightful and timely alerts to indicate if non-essential devices are being left powered on when the building is unoccupied over the weekends or non-working hours, or windows left open, or air conditioning being powered up and in use when the heating is also on, so the two are in conflict. And you can also report on air and water quality. So early detection of deterioration of air or water quality can save lives. You could be monitoring elements such as carbon monoxide in the air or Legionella in water before levels of either become harmful or even life-threatening. Another real critical point is around red care and alarm lines. So some of you may be aware simply by being notified by your supplier at home, as I was just recently by my supplier, that from the end of 2025, the traditional phone network, it's an analog phone network, also known as the PSTN, the public switch telephone network. We love acronyms in our industry. It will reach end of life at the end of 2025 and no further orders taken in 2023, almost just 2 years away. So a new means to connect is needed for many solutions, including all of the red care alarms that are already deployed across the UK. They currently rely on a system that is going to be completely defunct within the next 4 years. And IoT connectivity is likely the perfect answer. They can be deployed quickly, robustly, securely, and easily with no need for expensive or time-consuming installations. And the Internet of Things can also support vulnerable people in a very passive but actively monitoring system that will allow workers who typically support those lines and take those calls from residents to even potentially do other tasks. So it's going to make their jobs more efficient and streamlined. Body-worn alarms or sensors can alert relevant support teams if a resident falls, fails to respond, or even doesn't follow their typical daily routine. That could be something like getting out of bed the same time every day, showering, or even putting the kettle on. If they don't do that thing at the time they're expected to, an alert could be sent to the relevant support worker to check on that resident. So this all helps to support authorities and agencies with a duty of care towards their residents. Sorry, I am almost done. This is my last slide before I'm going to hand over to Jason. But the research of many analysts shows that people are also concerned about social housing due to the perceived link to crime, and IoT can absolutely help here too. The Internet of Things offers solutions where all manner of door and window sensors, CCTV cameras, and alarms that can all be used to help make buildings safer and more secure. And these solutions are now incredibly intelligent. There are alarms that can tell the difference between footsteps, human voices, and glass breaking by being able to identify not just that there's been a noise or motion, but actually what it was, can really help to ensure the right support or the right services are deployed, and also help to lead to fewer false alarms. There are CCTV cameras that use an artificial intelligence or facial recognition algorithms can identify residents or authorized personnel, so therefore only alert if something unexpected happens. So it's either an unauthorized person or an authorized person, but at the wrong time. Again, fewer false alarms, things only being triggered when needed, allow for much better responses. Having these solutions in the home or in communal areas within social housing can really help to make residents feel safer and reduce the perceived link of social housing to significant levels of crime. So hopefully some of that was useful. I really do. I am now going to hand over to Jason, who's going to talk about a couple of specific use cases. So over to you, Jason.
Thank you, Bernie. Afternoon all. So I will be touching on a couple of points that Bernie's already discussed, but mainly in some of the deals that we're working on at the moment. So what we've done is we've worked closely with one of our large security customers, whereas Bernie mentioned the turn off of the PSTN lines. So this customer has the red cables in care homes for emergency usage. Somebody needs someone to come to the room, pull the red cable cord. Discovered that all these are connected via PSTN lines, so they've got the cost of ripping all those out, putting a replacement of maybe Cat5 or fibre. So I was looking at some type of solution that was fixed cost, best ability to work in any environment, any location, and something that's easy to deploy. So what they've done is our customers created kind of like an alert box that sits in the resident's home or in the room. It's got one of the multi-network SIMs in there with a small amount of IoT data. All the data's pooled, so you wouldn't expect somebody to be using this all the time. So you don't want to be paying higher costs for something that could be sat on a table for months in, months out. And what they've done is they've locked it into the box. So now they can easily deploy these, plug and play. End user in an emergency situation presses the button, they get the care that they need. If you go to the next slide, please, Bernie. Yep, so what we've also discovered with this customer as well, and again, what's already been discussed, it's the red care lines, elevators, lifts, all these pieces of equipment have some type of emergency call usage in there. So like, in the elevators, you've got the old phone that you pick up. They're all connected via an old technology now that will be gone very soon. So with these IoT SIMs, the multi-network SIMs, we can put them in all these. The companies are developing all the time new equipment for this type of SIM card. We've also got eSIM capability, which is being released soon. So it's like a lot of these units for various locations have got the SIM card built in. So what we're learning is we've got the connectivity ready, and these companies are now coming to us with various, how can we get this work? How can we get the alarm system up and running again, the lifts, so they're always connected for an emergency, the emergency cords, buttons, alerting. So we're learning all the time and developing new technology to run alongside with what our customers are coming forward with. So more that we get involved with customers such as yourselves and discuss, scenarios and what you need these for, and we can work together, deployment, and get everyone safe, looked after. And as I said, it's with the 2025 switch off happening very soon. So it's becoming really quick, and it's time to start looking at what is connected. Where will people be left vulnerable when this is all switched off? Next slide. Okay, and we have another poll. What is it now? How likely do you wish? Oh, how likely are you to use IoT now? I believe that's my bit done.
I think that's encouraging. We've seen a bit of a shift, haven't we, up to more from the unsure up to the likely, quite likely, and highly likely. So that's encouraging.
Okay, we can move on to the next bit.
Okay.
We just need to run through some questions now, don't we? Probably.
Yeah. Thanks for that, guys. I've got a few questions that have come in, so I'll pose them. I think most of them are geared towards yourselves. How difficult is IoT to integrate into our current systems? Ed, do you want to answer that one?
Well, yeah, I think depends on the system, frankly, and some of the other guys might have a bit more input on some specifics. But I think we've alluded to some of the more straightforward ones that can be easily retrofitted to existing, property. So, for example, the alarm lines and movement sensors and those sorts of things, and the CCTV ones are relatively straightforward. We know from our sort of consumer experience about how some of these services are becoming more plug and play. So some of those are relatively straightforward. There may be some more specialist solutions that would require different infrastructure, more hardware, maybe integrated into the existing hardware. So things like boiler monitoring systems, door entry systems, those may need to be integrated into the hardware that's actually going into place. So the doors themselves or the boilers themselves. So those would require more work and more integration experience, but that really depends on the vendor of those companies. But changing out the connectivity is generally relatively straightforward. If those are SIM enabled, for example, changing that to a different service would be straightforward. But I think the key thing, whichever system you're looking at, is to think about IoT. So if you are replacing something, if you are replacing boilers and going through a schedule of heating maintenance and refurbishment, think about how that might benefit from being internet enabled, so you can get that sort of proactive alerts on maintenance issues ahead of time, rather than having to wait until something breaks. So it's just, have an eye on the future when you are carrying out any of that maintenance or refurbishment.
Okay, there is another question that kind of dovetails nicely into your answer there, and that is, why should we invest in IoT now as opposed to hanging fire and seeing how it kind of impacts the market? So
Well, I think some of that around that thinking about replacements and refurbishments is part of that thinking about it. It needs to be in people's minds, because obviously the sooner you start using anything like this and the sooner you are going to get the benefits of it, but also if you start getting better information about your estate, about the services you're providing to people, then that helps for future planning as well. So it enables actually you're going to essentially multiply the benefits, because we know that power of data, we know the power of that information and what people can do with it. So that's useful to have. But also, as both Bernie and Jason have mentioned, the PSTN switch off is, it's the end of 2025, but actually that's going to roll around very quickly. And actually there's a stop sell coming into effect on PSTN and ISDN and those traditional lines in 2023. So if you have got new schemes or new services required, at some point in 2023, you will not be able to buy anymore. So it's not just a matter of the old lines being turned off, it's a matter of thinking about what you're going to do if you do need anything, because in a couple of years' time, you'll struggle to actually buy any of the traditional systems. So you need to really think about replacements for that now, whether it is a SIM card, whether it is a data fiber connection. Just need to have that in your minds sooner rather than later.
Okay. A question just coming from John here. How aligned is the legal position on the use of IP systems for lift lines instead of analog? So I don't know who's best to answer that one. Daisy?
That's a good question. I'm not sure on that. I don't know whether Bernie's got any insight into that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the word lift is intentional. So these are lines installed in elevators. Are we saying?
I imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been deploying cellular connectivity in some of the biggest elevator safety organizations in Europe. Many thousands of services. We're able to deliver this using a private APN, exceptionally secure. It's multi-network, and Jason really, elaborated on the benefits of that for ease of deployment across all of those sites, robustness. If there's a local network issue, it will flick to another network. Examples, it makes it exceptionally resilient. So we're not aware of any legal implications or restrictions that would refrain us from doing that. So in fact, we're already working with some of the biggest elevator safety companies in Europe and deploying these in blocks of flats, shopping centres, colleges, etc. So with no issues at all. Now, a new emerging technology actually in that space is something that they call voice over LTE. So that the LTE network is the 4G network. So using the 4G network to carry that voice traffic, which again is seen as more robust, further reaching, better at penetrating building materials, etc., than your traditional voice network. So that's a nice new emerging technology that's come out in that space in the last 12 months or so as well.
Okay, thanks, Bernie, for that. Answers your question. John, there's one final question. What do you see the kind of main driver and most important use of IoT in the housing sector being? Obviously, you touched on fire and telecare, lone worker, etc. Is there a certain angle you think will take off more than any other?
Well, just from my perspective, I think anything that has an impact on tenant safety has got to be really at the forefront of people's minds. Obviously, it has been over the last few years, especially because of what's happened. So we know that, the elderly care, I think, is one of the key areas where we mentioned around, and obviously an aging population and the duty of care that social providers have, means that elderly care is one of the key ones around making sure that population is as safe as they can be, while maintaining their independence where possible. And obviously fire safety is very key. So fire alarms and carbon monoxide detectors and all those things can be linked in and connected. And again, it's rather than having that a lone alarm go off somewhere and not being heard or not be working, about having that information can be fed through to somebody, so somebody can actually proactively monitor it, and if something does happen, they're alerted to it in a way that's actually going to mean that something happens and it's dealt with. But also around security as well. So obviously there's those issues, but the security element around keeping people safe in their homes. So we mentioned door entry systems, CCTV, movement sensors as well around, you know, are there people in areas of a building where they shouldn't be? So I think for me, it's anything related to safety, but also obviously on top of that, we've got the productivity benefits from the example with meter reads or any of that sort of information where you've got people doing manual jobs that can be easily automated. So yeah, it's got to be safety first and keeping everybody as healthy as can be, but then also just any productivity gains that come off the back of those services, and then anything else that you can install, which there's always going to be something that can be improved.
Okay. I know I said it was the last question, but we have had another one coming from Bryn there. I don't know whether you want to answer this live or pick up after, but Bryn is saying they've already installed SIM card devices to all of the elevators. One of the issues is trying to find a cloud-operated door entry system that has video access for OOH emergency services. Have you got any ideas as to whether there are organisations already out there with this product?
Hi, it's Bernie. I'll take that one, Ross. Thank you.
Okay.
The short answer, Bryn, is yes. There are organisations out there that would have this exact type of solution for this exact purpose. So probably something that we can take up offline after the session. So I would just ask you to get in touch with your typical point of contact, and we can elaborate further on that conversation. But yeah, please feel optimistic that there is a solution out there, and we have it for you.
Brilliant. All right, thanks, Bernie. So I think that'll do for the questions. Just want to wrap things up with saying thanks very much for your attendance today. Hopefully it's been really useful for you. Like I said at the start of the session, we have recorded this webinar, and you'll be sent links through on email in the following day or so. So you'll also get contact details for Daisy Communications and PfH should you have any questions following on from this. So yeah, I'd just like to end by thanking Daisy and everyone who attended for today. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.